Hello gamers, this is Tom Sidener, the Lonely Gamer, and today I'm going to show you a solo variant that you can use to play any of the Cryptozoic Cerberus card games, one of which is this DC deck building game, which is my favorite. Now, the Cerberus engine has been used for a bunch of different games. It's been used for the Lord of the Rings games, there's 3 of them. There's a hockey game, I think, there's a wrestling game. There are different DC games like Villains. There are several games that use the Cerberus engine, and this solo variant should work with any of them. So let me go and get a game set up, and then I'll come right back. Okay, so here is a normal setup for a Cerberus card game. The first thing you have is you have a stack of villains or bad guys or somebody that you're fighting. Usually that ranges from around 8 total cards. There's usually a card that you start with, which is your base card, and then you randomly select other cards that go underneath them upside down so that you don't know what they are. The first guy usually does not have a reveal effect, but the guys underneath him usually have a reveal effect that do something bad to everyone when they are revealed. You also have a standard stack of kick cards. These are your basic attacks that are a little better than the ones that come in your hand, but they're always available. At least they're always available until the stack runs out. The next thing you have is a stack of weakness cards or some kind of bad card that you can throw into other players' decks, which give a negative points value at the end of the game. The next thing you have is you have the market stack, which is just a stack of cards that you're going to be playing from. In the solo version, this is the end game condition. If this stack runs out, the game is over. Also an end condition in the solo game is the stack of bad guys. If the stack of bad guys runs out, the game is also over. In the event that this stack runs out and the game ends, you actually lose. You don't get to count your points, the game is over. If the game ends by this stack running out, then you actually complete the solo game and you get to count up your points, and you're going to compare the points that you have with the dummy player that you're going to be playing against. So the only 2 modifications to the game that you're going to do for the solo version is, one, normally you usually put 5 cards out. Here for the market row, in a solo game you are going to add a card. You're going to add a 6th card to the market row. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to provide 3 dice. Now, I say 3 dice because this is the way I play it. I do not like to be frustrated in games, so I play with 3 dice. If you would like to make the game much harder, you can add dice to the opponent. These dice are theoretically the opponent's hand and what they are going to use to purchase cards throughout the game. So I would recommend starting out with 3 dice, and if you seem like you beat it every time and you want to add a challenge, add a 4th dice or add a 5th dice to make the game harder. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to provide yourself, and not the dummy player, with a standard starter deck of cards, which in this case I get 7 punches and 3 vulnerabilities. Each Cerberus game is going to have something similar to that. 7 attack cards with a minimal attack, and 3 cards that do absolutely nothing, which don't help you, that just kind of clog up your hand and make it so that you want to get them out. This is your starting deck. You're going to shuffle that up. This dummy player starts with no cards, absolutely no cards. So, on your turn, you are going to play your turn as normal, as any other Cerberus game. So you're going to draw your 5 cards. You're going to spend your power to buy cards or attack things, and then you're going to just discard your vulnerabilities because they don't do anything for you. So in this instance, I have 3 power. This card right here has 3 power. I would buy this, put this in my discard pile. Then I would discard all my cards, and that would end my turn. Now we go to the solo player's turn. So the first thing that the solo player does is he refills the market. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, that in this DC one that I'm showing you now, there are no ambush cards. But in some of the other Cerberus games, there are cards called ambush cards. And if the dummy player would refill the market with a card that has an ambush on it, then you would do the ambush. It's like an attack. This game has attack cards that you play against the other players, but some have ambush cards. They're like an attack, and you would perform the attack against the solo player. And I'm going to go into, in a few minutes, what you do in different situations when the solo player becomes attacked. But in this situation, we are just going to go ahead and refill the market with the card so that the solo player can go ahead and take his turn. There's no ambush, so he can go ahead and continue. So for the solo player's turn, the first thing you do is you take the 3 dice and you roll them. So once you've rolled the dice, and in this case you can see I rolled a 1, a 5, and a 5. In this case you would take the cards from the market corresponding to the dice that the solo player rolled. And those are the dice, those are the cards that the solo player is going to buy this round. So I rolled a 1, so the solo player is going to take the 1 card. Now, this 1 card is a location, and in the solo game you have 2 options. One, you can ignore locations for the solo player, and I highly recommend you do that in the starting games that you play, because it will make the game much harder for you, and just put that card in the solo player's discard pile. When you get more advanced at playing, you can actually leave these locations out and apply the effects for the solo player each time. But in this case, we're going to just put it into our discard pile for the solo player. I'm also going to buy the 5th card because I have a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to buy the 5th card, and I'm going to put it in the solo player's discard pile. Now, at any given time, because I have 3 dice, and this would change if you had 4 or 5, but at any given time, the solo player could buy up to 3 cards. Now, in the instance of a duplicate, like I have here, we have 2 5s, then we only buy 1 card. So actually doubles for the solo player are not a good thing, because it's going to limit the amount of cards he gets. So you want to roll doubles, because that's going to help you win this game. Now, if you roll triples, then the solo player gets to take the top card from the enemy's deck. So it's just like one of your other players had taken out an enemy. You take the top card from the enemy deck, you put it into their discard pile, the solo player's discard pile, and then you reveal the new enemy, and you do what it says. The appearance attack will affect both you and the solo player. Once the solo player is done, then you're going to refill the market just like you would any other time. At this point, you would be susceptible to any ambush cards that come out, and then you play your turn as normal again. You draw your 5 cards, you're going to use your power to buy cards, and your vulnerabilities are not going to help you. So, the game progresses just like that throughout the entire game until either this stack is empty and you lose, or this stack is empty and you win, and then you see if you beat the solo player. At the end of the game, the solo player scores just like a normal player. You count up all the victory points in the bottom stars here, or in the bottom portion of the Cerberus, whatever it gives you for points, and of course subtracting any points from the solo player for any weaknesses they might have, and that is their total score. And the goal is to try to have a higher total score than the solo player. So let's go through some things that could happen for the solo player. I'm going to actually give the solo player some more cards just so that I can use some examples here. So let's go through some things that could happen to the solo player during the game. So remember, these dice are theoretically the solo player's hand. So anytime a card says to discard cards from the solo player's hand, you remove a dice for that turn. So if there was a attack card like this attack card here that says each foe chooses and discards a card, then the solo player would actually discard a dice for the next turn. So the next turn you would only roll 2 dice. This would make it in a 3 dice game, impossible for him to get the big bad, and also would, could, in the event of a duplicate, cause him to only take 1 card. So, now, there are some cards that ask the solo player to reveal his hand. So, in this event, the solo player doesn't actually have a hand, but when asked to reveal a hand, what you do is you take the solo player's deck, you randomly draw 5 cards from that deck, and then that would be the solo player's hand for this turn. So, it may say, reveal his hand, and if he has a card of 3 or more cost, discard a card, then you would still discard dice. So this would just represent their hand, and you would still discard dice appropriately based on what it tells you to do. Another thing that can come up is it may ask you to randomly draw a card from the solo player's deck, or it may ask you to randomly select a card, or it may ask you to randomly flip a card from the top of the deck. In any of those instances, you just shuffle the solo player's deck and you randomly draw a card. This would be the card that would be randomly drawn from their hand. This would be a card that would be randomly selected from their deck. This would also be the card that would be randomly flipped from their deck. Then, of course, you just go through the text, and whatever it's asking for, this card would be the card that you do. If it says to place a weakness into the solo player's deck, then you would just take a weakness and add it into his pile of cards. If it says to remove cards from his hand, of course that would represent the dice. Another thing that cards may ask you to do is to remove a location that the solo player owns. So if the solo player is not playing with locations out, then you don't do anything. If the solo player is playing with revealed locations, then you would take that location and put it into their deck, and then it would no longer be available to that solo player. So there are some situations that ask that the player select a number and then draw a card from their deck, and if it matches that number, then there's some kind of penalty. So what I do in that situation is I draw 5 cards from the solo player's deck, and then I look at the cards and I see what numbers are represented there. So here I have 3, 3, 6, 2, and 4. And then what I do is I take the number that's represented the most. So in this case it would be 3. The reason I do this is it makes the odds better of actually picking that card, because if you just randomly draw a card and you draw a 7, that could be the only 7 in your deck. But if you pick the cards that are most represented in your deck, then that means that there may be other cards in there like it more than likely. So in this case I would select 3, then I would reveal the top card from the deck and see if it matches. And in this case it's a 7, and it does not. But if it had been a 3, and if it would have, then the bad thing would take effect, and that would happen to the solo player, either being losing cards from his hands or adding weaknesses or whatever else it asks you to do for the solo player. So that's about it. That's the rules for playing the Cerberus engine solo. These rules should cover most instances that happen in a Cerberus game. If there's things that I did not cover, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I will answer those. I do not have every Cerberus game. I have a lot of them, but I do not have every one, so there could be things in some of them that I don't know about. But if they are, I will try to come up with a situation that will fulfill that need. If I missed anything, then I will put it in the comments, and also in the video description I will put the actual rules. I actually have the rules out there. They've been out there for a long time. In fact, if you are on Board Game Geek, you may have seen these rules already, and if you've seen them you might say that, wow, the Lonely Gamer is stealing his ideas from Newt's dad on Board Game Geek, but that is not the case, because I am Newt's dad on Board Game Geek, and I have posted these rules on Board Game Geek, but I'm going to post them in the show notes as well, so that you can read through them. Any modifications to the rules that come up through comments from you guys or anything else, I will also add to the show notes so that I can keep this up to date. But I really enjoy the Cerberus card games. DC deck building is my favorite. My DC deck building is full of all kinds of cards because I have added expansions and a bunch of other cards to mine. So I've got a lot of cards in this deck. This is about 1/4 of my deck. My deck is usually about this high. But anyway, I play this a lot, and I love to play it solo. And so I love this variant, and I've played it solo a lot with this variant, and I've run into very little problems. And so I hope this works for you. So to all you lonely gamers out there, keep on gaming, and I will see you in the next video.